We're holding in the series the 13 principles of our faith, Ikarei HaEmunah. Tonight we'll discuss principle number 4, Shu Rishon V'hu Acharon, or in English, that I believe with perfect faith that God is first and last. Before we get into the actual principle, I need to give you a very important introduction. Tonight's introduction will be a little bit scientific in nature, because we will be covering some scientific points that relate to this topic, to this principle. Something very important has happened in the past 170 years. The Zohar actually makes a very fascinating statement that in the year 1840, Yipatchu sha'arei chokhmah, the gates of wisdom, of knowledge, will open up. You remember that Etz Hadat that you may have read about in Parashat Bereshit, the tree of knowledge? There's a tremendous amount of knowledge, tremendous amount of wisdom in the creation, in this world that we're unaware of course. We're beginning little by little to see the incredible complexity that is in creation because of technology, because of the tools that we have today. We're able to see more and hopefully understand a little bit better than we did in the past. So what is happening ever since the Industrial Revolution, or approximately as the Zohar says, from the year 1840, which corresponds to the year 600 in the 6th millennium, all of a sudden Hashem will allow for those pieces of information, for that vast amount of knowledge that was now known to the past generations, all of a sudden it will become known, it will become available. And that is why you see progressively, year after year, generation after generation, an incredible amount of knowledge. If you bought a computer 2 years ago, you have to throw it out. There's something new, there's new technology, and it's getting more and more advanced as time goes by. And this all of a sudden occurs approximately at the year the Zohar says, the year 1840. Why then and not before, Hashem knows. But we do know that there's something about that year, or about that time, in reference to the 6,000 years that this world will exist, that we're getting closer to Mashiach. And as we get closer to Mashiach, Hashem is revealing more of Himself, more of this knowledge that was not disclosed in the past. It was not the opportune time, and now it is. But unfortunately, something happened that people are unaware of. The Kabbalah discusses this. The Zohar gets into it a little bit. Is that even though this vast amount of knowledge, whether it's electricity or nuclear energy or microbiology, whatever it is that has become so advanced, this koach, this yeda, this chokhmah, this knowledge, nechtaf al yedei chitzonim. The Mekubalim explain that this knowledge, for the most part, will be kidnapped, will be usurped, will be taken mostly by those on the left camp, the impure forces, the external forces, the chitzonim, not by the kedusha, not through, in other words, those who learn the Torah and those who are observant of Hashem, but through some other force that exists out there. That other force being the koach achitzoni, the impure forces. The best way to understand impure forces is those things that do not necessarily have anything to do with doing God's will. Exploration of space. Exploring space, does that have anything directly to do with the observance of Torah and mitzvot? No, not at all. Okay, you follow me? So it will be taken or used, right, by all the other things that are not as significant to the purpose of life, to the purpose of creation. And what happens as a result is that you have a tremendous amount of emphasis, all of a sudden, on all kinds of theories that in the past did not exist, that are being espoused today by great minds and scientists, that are contrary to the belief of the Torah, contrary to belief in a God. One of the, I guess, fairest statements that was made by an evolutionist, this is an evolutionist, one who believes in evolution, right, that there's no creator, chas v'shalom, is as follows. Basically, he says there's only two options, two beliefs. Either you believe in a creator, or you believe in evolution, that everything evolved by itself. And why does he choose to believe in evolution? Because the belief in a creator is just too fantastic. You see what he's saying? Even though he admits that statistically evolution doesn't make too much sense, because that's also fantastic, from nothing, from a big bang, for a whole world, a complex world should evolve, that's just incredible. But to believe in a creator, that's just too much for him. Now we know there's more to that than just that simple statement of something being too fantastic to believe. It could be psychological, and it could be philosophical as to why these people say what they say, why they have a hard time believing that there's a God. There's various explanations for it. And we've discussed that in the past, that it's not something easy for somebody to come to terms with. Even if he knows deep down that it makes more sense that there's a creator. But it's too fantastic, and what it really means is too difficult for him to accept this. Nevertheless, he is right. These are the only two options. Either there is a creator, or how else do you explain how the world came to be by itself? I mean, there's nothing really else. There's nothing different other than that. As these ideas are being addressed, as they're being elaborated on, discussed, and written up, and being taught today in many, many high schools, religion in itself is being attacked from another direction. Because science has become so advanced, religion is using science is using the tools that it has at its disposal to invalidate religion or the belief in creation by showing that the world is many millions of years old, not 5,771. So now you're having an attack on religion or religious beliefs from various angles, and all of this because of the scientific or because of the Industrial Revolution, and because of the advance in technology, the tools that we have, and how could you dispute them? I mean, they're using tools, they're scientists, they're smart, and so forth. So because of this tremendous amount of what appears to be proof, even though it's not really proof, which I will talk about tonight, you're having individuals who are religious, some of them even rabbis, who are saying, wait a minute, why get into a fight with evolutionists about the age of the earth? Let's make peace. There's nothing in our sources that says necessarily that the world is a young world, 5,771. It doesn't say that in the Torah. Right? We have a tradition like that. It's possible that every day of the 7 days of the week, each day was 1,000 years, each day was 1,000,000 years. Maybe there was many millions of years before the actual creation of the world. It's not a contradiction. We can live in peace with evolutionists. We believe that God created the world, but it took millions of years, So the age of the earth, that problem, they try to do away with it. Because, that should not be a contradiction. That does not contradict. You follow me? At least let's get rid of this problem. You're trying to show me that something is millions of years old? That's possible. And you know what? It would not be a contradiction. There is some truth to that. It would not be a contradiction to what we know. Because there's various ways to explain it. But what are they trying to do? The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is not the accepted tradition, the millions of years old. The accepted tradition is that every day of the 7-day week was 24 hours. That's the accepted tradition. There may be other opinions, but that's the accepted one. Plus, we're not going to attempt to make peace with the scientists. We have no reason to. In other words, all these people are trying to, to be on the side of science, not to appear that they are opposed to it, because science is science. So they try to say, we can reconcile the difference. There are no differences when it comes to the age of the earth. But it's very important to stay away from this, not only because of our tradition, because the whole idea is not to fall into the trap. There is a major argument here about how did this all begin, and that's what matters. And we don't want to give away an inch, because once you start giving away, compromising, you're going to fall into the trap. So that's why I mentioned this in very strong terms, that not only is tradition important, and tradition is very clear about it, we're not going to just try to find ways to make peace with them, because they have no more proof. Even though we may not be able to prove it, let's assume we can't, they can for sure not prove it. And the proof that they offer, I'm going to disprove tonight. Yeah?
Well, but doesn't the Zohar say that the reason we notice things are billions of years old is that they are, and that this is not the first world Hashem created?
Okay, I'm going to get to that. That's a good question about worlds. So that's all part of the lecture. So in case I miss something, you're welcome to bring it up, but that's obviously something I'm going to mention too. The worlds, the many worlds. Yeah. Another difficulty that scientists have is with the philosophy that this God created everything ex nihilo, as it's called in Latin, or as we call it in Hebrew, yesh mi'ayin. We're used to creating or making things from raw matter. You have the matter, you make something, you form something with it. But to bring about something from scratch, from nothing, how does that happen? And to claim that this God does miracles, which means that he goes against the laws of nature, this is also something called supernatural. So supernatural, ex nihilo, these are concepts that scientists have a very hard time. So in all honesty, in fairness, of course, scientists do have some difficulties understanding how this is possible, unless you introduce emunah, complete faith. But if you're going to use a scientific mind and you're going to try to prove things in the laboratory, you find that very difficult because it goes against everything you believe. So that is some of the difficulties that they have. And what is the truth? The truth is that religion cannot be proven in a scientific way. A lot of what we know is belief, even though it is provable, and I've spoken about that for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish nation, emunah is really yediyah. It's a knowledge. We have clarity about certain things. Nevertheless, it does involve a certain degree of emunah, because we don't know everything. So we do believe certain things. But to them, you need to be able to prove it scientifically in a laboratory. That's not possible. To make things more difficult, the hashgacha elyonah, divine providence, Hashem, made it even more difficult and more complicated for anybody to figure it out, to figure out the truth. He concealed himself. Very important point to always keep in mind. Hashem intentionally made it difficult to figure out. If it would be obvious, if anything would be easily provable and obvious, that would interfere with our free will. In order for Hashem to bring about fairness, complete free will, that people actually have the choice to believe or not to believe, he conceals himself, and he does not make it too easy to prove. Just look what's going on today. The tremendous amount of arguments between creationists versus evolutionists, people who believe in the Big Bang. Isn't it common sense? Isn't it logical? Doesn't it make more sense that there's a creator, that it's designed? You see, people are very, very die-hard believers in evolution for obvious reasons. They want to stay away from that. If it would be just too obvious, if it would be provable beyond reasonable doubt, then of course everybody would be a believer. So that makes it even more complicated, the fact that Hashem intentionally wanted it to be so, that you cannot prove it to anybody's satisfaction, at least not 100%. The problem that some of us have with scientists is that they should have kept their mouth shut when it comes to creation. Use science for a lot of things, but not to try to figure out how did the world begin. That should not be a scientific question. That does not belong in the science class. That's not something that you will be able to ever prove. And I think most scientists can agree with that. You cannot prove that. It's just impossible to prove. Then leave it out. Had the scientists left alone this question of how things began, even though it's tempting to talk about that too, then of course we would have had less problems with them, because science has done a lot of wonderful things in being able to explain certain things, in being able to clarify certain things. With the tremendous powerful tools that we have, we're able to see into a cell. Many cures have been developed because of these incredible tools and because of the scientific achievements in those areas, in those fields. So, but it's better to leave out this question as to how it all began, because science does not have an answer for that, a real answer either. How do we approach the subject? What's the best way to approach this topic if you have people who are not believers and people who, of course, are believers? No matter what you say, you should know, even if you have a very strong scientific background, even if you're very knowledgeable with all the theories, you will always find scientists in the other camp who will show the weaknesses of your argument. They can be very, very sophisticated in finding something wrong with what you say, or not being satisfied with your argument. And this discussion is going on for many, many years between scientists in both camps. They're both scientists, they're both knowledgeable, very intelligent people, and they're not really getting anywhere. Now, even though it's true that there may be some valid questions that evolutionists have, questions or doubts about certain findings or certain ideas that creations have expressed, you must realize that what scientists say today can tomorrow be completely disproven. Many, many theories have come up and have disappeared. Many ideas were expressed and they were years later proven to be false. So even though today there may be some issues where some scientists have difficulties with, because based on what they see or what they think, even those ideas can eventually be proven wrong. If it's not a fact, if it's only a theory, which a lot of this is all about, is theory, it can eventually be proven wrong. How do I look at this? The way I see this is that it's a whole bunch of waste of time. All these arguments between procreation versus evolution. And I'll tell you why, what's going on. Each one is having a hard time convincing the other. Even though creationists are making a very, very strong argument. They do really have a strong case. But you know why it's a waste of time, this whole argument? Not because you're not going to convince the atheists so easily. They're atheists. See, if they would be at least agnostics, agnostics means prove to me and I'll believe. But many of them just don't have made up their minds to be an atheist. How are you going to win the fight? How are you going to win the argument? So the problem with this is, it's not that you're not going to win. The whole thing is really a waste of time. Everybody is avoiding the main issue. There's too much hesech hadat. Hesech hadat means this, all of this is a distraction. It's a distraction from the biggest question of all times. Let's not try to figure out everything. Let's just try to figure out the most important question of all. What is life? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of all of this? But the moment you use the word purpose, purpose means that there is a designer, there's a creator, because he did it for a purpose. But even if you try to leave out creator, does this make any sense to you? Think about it. One little earth in the midst of all these galaxies, as far as we can tell from what we know, only here there's life. Perfect weather, right? Not too close to the sun, not too far from the sun. There's just, everything is so right, perfect for the existence of life. And what is life? And what for? Why should it happen? It could just happen? It didn't happen anywhere else. And there's a man and there's a woman, and if they come together, they can have children, and so do other animals. Wow. They can replicate each other. And there's clouds, and they bring rain, and that is part of how we have our food, together with the sun rays. And what for? I mean, how come? See, the big question that people should be asking, instead of how did this all begin, or how old the world is, and no, you're right, and no, you're wrong. Hey, wait a minute. Let's try to ask the biggest question about, what are we doing here? What is this for? Why don't you begin to think from this angle? And of course, this will no longer be a scientific question. It will be a philosophical question, I admit. But that is a much more important question than anything else in the world. Because The truth of the matter is, there is no answer to all the questions that we will ever have. There's no answer to all the questions. Number two, people have preconceived notions that they've made up their mind. Number three, there's always going to be a lot of ignorance. People will not be knowledgeable of everything there is to be knowledgeable, and will not have all the information that they need. So therefore, why don't you begin to ask the more philosophical question? And let me ask you another question. Isn't this a question more important than anything else in life, in the world? Like, some people are trying to figure out how a car works, the mechanics of a car, a plane, a faucet. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of books actually written today on how to fix this, how to do that. What about the question of all questions, the biggest question of all? Why not spend time and effort trying to figure that one out? Avraham Avinu did that. What's going on here? Is this place that we call the world all by itself, all on its own, nobody running the show? What's going on? Why don't you contemplate that question? Isn't that something more worthwhile our time to consider than what car to buy, what kind of hardwood floor to put in your house? I mean, people have all kinds of questions. People want to figure out all kinds of things. How to fix something, how to do something, what career they should choose. This is the biggest question of all, and people do not spend enough time trying to figure that one out. Instead of investing so much money in space, trying to figure out if there's life on Mars, you know how many things still need to be solved on this planet Earth? How many people are still hungry? They haven't solved all the problems here, and they're trying to go to space and spend billions of dollars. For what? Now there are certain things being done in space that can eventually benefit us. Of course, I will agree. All kinds of research. I know that. But a lot of this money that they are spending in space is pet projects of people who have curiosity of wanting to know if there's any water on Mars, or whether and perhaps aliens living in some other planets. Maybe we're not here by ourselves. A lot of this money should have been spent on Earth, trying to figure out things here on Earth. That would have been a lot more important. The Jew has had a different approach all along. The Jew looked at life in the following way. The purpose, or part of the purpose of my presence in this world, is to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to come close to Him, and to attain shlemut, to attain completeness. He doesn't have to figure out how he came here exactly. He doesn't have to figure out, what happened to the dinosaurs. After all, they existed. Here are the skeletons, and the scientists are saying they're millions of years old. That's not the main issue that I need to tackle right now. The main issue that I need to tackle is, how am I going to get close to this God? How am I going to be a better person, a better husband, a righteous individual? I need to spend a lot of time and effort becoming shalem. And how am I going to do that? So there were two famous brothers who gave us the following idea of how to go ahead and do this. Rabbi Elyahu Kin and his brother Rav Zusha. Rabbi Elyahu Kin says, in order for you to attain completeness, look at the greatness of God. Look at the majesty of God. Look at the universe. Look how great everything is. And from that greatness, you will know what you need to do. How come? Because observing all that will make you humble. When a person becomes humble, he eventually mitbatel. Mitbatel, that means he lets go of any personal agendas, and everything that matters is what Hashem wants of him. Mitbatel v'nichna means that he humbles himself before someone who's greater than him. It's humbling himself before God means what Hashem wants is more important than anything else. Once one humbles himself before God, he has no questions. The questions are gone. No questions asked whatsoever. I don't need to know all that. It's just going to get in my way. It's going to disturb me. Do you know how many great Jewish minds got lost? Got lost. Deviated from the path of plain emunah because they started thinking all kinds of philosophical ideas. things didn't make sense to them, and they got all messed up. Whereas the simple Jews who were tmimim, sincere in their emunah, they were not very, very smart. They were willing to go as far as giving their lives for what they believed in. You're thinking too much, you get distracted, you're running the risk of Chas v'Shalom falling into this trap. It's one of the traps of the Yetzer Hara. And what is missing there? The hachna'ah, the batlut, the humbling oneself, the not thinking of yourself as being number one. Hashem is number one. Hashem is number one, therefore, I have to do first and foremost what He wants of me. I don't have to think and try to figure out the whole world. I will never be able to do that. And if there are questions, I'll try to get an answer, of course. You always need to try to get an answer to your question but there are questions that we don't have answers for. And that's also an answer, that there is no answer. Rabbi Zusha said, instead of looking at the greatness of Hashem, look at how small you are. Look how small you are compared to everything else. And that is how you will be able to reach Shlemut. Each one is giving a totally opposite direction, but they're both correct. Either way, we're trying to achieve Shlemut, completeness. We're trying to be complete. We're trying to reach our maximum potential in getting close to this God. This should be our life's goal. This is where our efforts should go towards. Of course, we want to have a successful marriage. We want to invest in our children. That's part of the same thing. It's part of the same mission. Baruch Hashem, that's part of our tradition and faith. But it doesn't mean it's automatic. People still have to get up each morning and do that. It's one thing you've been told this, you read about it, you learned it. But how many people get up early in the morning to Shachrit, put on tefillin? They get up at 11 o'clock in the morning, they're lazy, they don't do it. They don't feel like doing it. They skip a prayer sometimes. They're not strong in some areas, even though they know the truth. They know that God exists. They know the Torah is true. But they have a weakness that they're not willing to deal with. They lack clarity. They lack strength. They're not applying enough effort where they should be. They're applying a lot more effort trying to make money. Why? Money is just a means to an end. It's not the end. It's not the end. That's not the tachlit. You're not here for that. You're here for a totally different mission that has nothing to do with money. Money is just a means to survive, to pay the bills. But some people have made that the goal. You see, that's what's happening in science. They're forgetting about the ikar, the tachlit. People are not focused on the tachlit. The tachlit means the ultimate goal of what we're here for. Try to figure that one out, and then everything else will fall into place. What's interesting is that some of these scientists are so arrogant that they really think that what they say is the truth, and nothing else can be true. There were many scientists before them, like Galileo Galilei and Isaac Newton, and some even great scientists today who do believe in God and creation. They're just as smart, if not smarter. Why look down at them? It's very important that if you have an opposing opinion, that you at least be respectful and accept the fact that you may be wrong. When somebody says, I'm not wrong, he is wrong, there's something wrong with him. There's a psychological problem here too. There's something psychologically not right. Anytime a person says, I may be wrong, I'm not sure, but this is what I believe, okay, that shows a little bit of humbleness, a little bit of open-mindedness, that he may be wrong. Right? So if you ever encounter somebody who doesn't want to accept or entertain your position at all, there's something wrong. There's no use arguing with him. We have the great advantage, Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael, that we not only have the knowledge, the tradition, we have something called testimony. We were all witnesses when this happened, when we received the Torah, when we heard the voice of Hashem. That is the way it's been handed down. That is the way it happened. And our personal experience of survival throughout the history, our personal experience that even Goyim like Mark Twain and others have been able to say, this is an incredible feat, that the Jews still around. The Greeks and the Romans are all gone. The Persians, they're all gone. And they were great empires, and the Jews still around, even though he was persecuted and beaten. So we have history, we have testimony, we have Goyim who are amazed at the Jewish survival. Doesn't that say something too? There have been Goyim who have observed that. They've noticed that. They've written about it. It's not just not just Mark Twain. There have been others, great people who were honest, who were humble, no monkey business, no nonsense, just plain, logical, common sense people, and therefore they were able to see through the fog. But this is an incredible phenomena. How do you explain it? What is the secret, he asks Mark Twain, of the immortality of the Jew? He remains without an answer. I think he does. He never wrote an answer. The answer is because Hashem has been with us. Without that, of course, we would not survive. Anybody have any doubt about that? So I've given you this introduction so that you should understand this following Ikar, because this Ikar deals with a very important idea that Hashem is one. We've already covered. That Hashem is first, and some say is also last. In other words, there's nothing before him, there's nothing after him. Kadmon lechol davar. These four, we've covered so far four principles, and B'ezrat Hashem also the fifth one to an extent, are all important. They're all pretty much related. Whoever does not accept one of them, he's considered a kofer be'ikar. He's considered an atheist, one who denies God's existence. So you can't say, well, God is one, but he's not the first. See what I mean? It's all or nothing. All of these principles that we've covered so far, therefore, are all related to each other. God is eternal. Being first and being last is true. That's the definition of the principle, but we're also talking about eternity. And that is why, in the very beginning of the Torah, the first statement that is made is a declaration by Hashem himself, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. As Rashi points out, the Torah could have easily began from the first mitzvah, Achodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, Kiddush HaChodesh, the month of Nisan. Why did the Torah choose to begin from Bereshit? Right? So Rashi gives his own answer, his own explanation, that Hashem owns the world and he gave us Eretz Yisrael, he divided up the land, he divided up the world, he gave it to whichever nation he wanted. But the Ramban says there's another idea here, a simple idea. The reason why he begins with Bereshit is because that's such an important piece of information for us to know. How did it all begin? Isn't that important? Bereshit, you should know in the very beginning, bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. The first thing you need to know is that God created the world. That's a very important fact. The Ramban says the reason why Rashi is not pointing to that is because there's so much that goes into creation that it would have been too much of a topic to discuss, too technical. But nevertheless, the Torah still makes that statement because it's a very important fact that everybody needs to know. Hashem was there from the beginning. Hashem will always be around. Yes?
Does Rashi make that statement based on previous source, or does he come up with it himself?
No, based on the Midrash. Yeah.
So the
So,
Rambam makes that similar statement based on some other...
no, the Ramban says, but wait a minute, Rashi, why even bring up such a question? I can tell you an easy answer. Ramban says, I can give you an easy answer why the Torah began with Bereshit, because it's an important fact. Then why didn't Rashi think of that? So Ramban says he did think of that, but the problem with saying that is that it's a very, very complex fact. Perhaps the Torah should have started with something simpler. Okay, so Rashi says, I have to therefore explain another reason why the Torah began with Bereshit, and that has to do with Hashem dividing up the land. But there are other explanations too, that not only dividing up the land, it's a very important statement in itself. It makes a whole big difference in our life if we believe in that. At the very beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There was nothing else besides him. So that's why this is a very important concept, because what are we saying? That we believe that there's no such thing as a Big Bang. Come along some of these people who try to make peace with scientists. Wait a minute. Big Bang? That's not out of this world. Maybe God created the world with a Big Bang. And by the way, it must have been a Big Bang. It was. It was tremendous. But you see how they're trying to, there's no proof that there was a Big Bang. Then why are you trying to flatter? Why are you trying to make peace with them? No, it's okay. We're not arguing with science. It could have been a Big Bang. There's no reason to say there was a Big Bang. It says simply that God created the world, and that's enough. Because even if you say there was a Big Bang, well, wait a minute, what was there before the Big Bang? What made the Big Bang? You see how it's not important how it became? And by the way, I have proof that it's not a Big Bang, because it was over 6 days that it was created. It wasn't zoom, everything at once. Actually, something was done on Sunday, something was done on Monday, something was done on Tuesday. It was actually not a Big Bang after all. But there are rabbis even, religious people who attempt to just make peace with science so that there shouldn't be any. The less arguments, the better. You don't need to. We have a very, very strong tradition. So therefore, our emunah is very, very clear about the fact that there is a creator. The world was created, therefore there's a creator. And if he wouldn't be first, he wouldn't be the creator. He would be a created. He has to be first. You understand that now? If he wouldn't be first, that's the principle we're talking about tonight, that he's first. If he wouldn't be first, then he wouldn't be a creator. And we believe, of course, that the world was created. And the simplest way to see it is, as one rabbi pointed out, is just like a suit testifies that a tailor made it, the world testifies that it was created. That's the simplest way of looking at it. In other words, you don't need to use too much science to figure that one out. In the same way, a suit tells you that there was a tailor, in the same way, without too much science, you can see that the world is created. Now, not only is the world created, all the scientists with all their knowledge have not been able to ever create anything from scratch. Not even one mosquito. To give it life? Nothing. Nothing in the world has ever been created by man, by a human being. They can't reproduce. They can't recreate creation. Only God could, not them. Another thing that I find fascinating is that the whole world pretty much follows the same day of the week. Everybody agrees that today is Wednesday. Well, at least Wednesday, wherever it's still night. It's already Thursday in some places. But everybody's pretty much following the same day of the week. There's pretty much consensus for a long, long time at least. Maybe all the way back to the beginning. Everybody knows what day of the week it is. That's interesting. What is the other camp say? Those that do not really believe in creation, that basically everything evolved over time. Now just remember one thing, these ideas that are being spoken about today did not exist 200-300 years ago so much. The majority of the world did have a religious belief that God created the world, even though there was a lot of religions and they all believed in all kinds of gods and different deities and so forth. But they did believe in a supreme power or powers. It is only in the past 150 or 60 years that there is this belief in evolution or in gradual evolvement of the world. For those of you who are a little bit more interested in this topic, I just want to remind you that there is something called microevolution and macroevolution. We do believe in microevolution. Micro means small. Macro means big. They want to say that man came from a monkey. Even though you should know there is a midrash that does say that many, many monkeys came from men. The other way around. In other words, that certain individuals were cursed and became monkeys. But not the other way around. Man did not come from monkey. That would be macroevolution. That would be a big evolution. That doesn't happen. Oh, but if you give it millions of years, it could happen. Now you begin to see why they need millions of years, because in order to support evolution, you need to have millions of years. It doesn't happen in 2,000 years. Right? We have pictures or paintings of people that lived 3,000 years ago. Sculptures. They didn't look like monkeys. Right? So you need millions of years for this to happen. Now, what is microevolution? Microevolution is true. That depending on where you live, the geography definitely has some effect. You move to Japan or China, and you live there for a couple hundred years, you're going to look like Japanese and Chinese. You're going to have slanty eyes. Well, otherwise, how did they become like that? Some scientists, by the way, will not accept that. But this has been proven. This you can easily prove. People in Scandinavia who are blonde hair, blue eyes, it has to do with the amount of exposure to the sun. People who live in the heat, in Africa, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, curly hair, darker skin. It has to do, this is a micro evolution. There is small, minute evolutions of people, but not drastic. You have all kinds of small little changes, that animals or human beings can develop as a result of their environment, but minor, not going from one species to a different species altogether. So even though they claim it's millions of years, our tradition is that this world will last for 6,000 years, 1,000 years per day of the week that the world was created. So we have very little time left till the end of the Olam Hazeh as we know it. And as I said before, every day of creation, as far as we know, was 24 hours. There's no reason to believe that it was more than that. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes on the major proof that they have. The major proof that the world should be millions of years old. They have many methods to measure. Many methods to measure. The most reliable and accurate way of measuring any object in the world is called carbon-14 dating. I have a whole long discussion about this, and I don't want to go into too much specifics and tire you with all the details, but it is true that you can take an object from Egypt of 3,000 years ago, and using carbon-14 dating, this method, you can come within 100 years or so, you can come very close to measuring objects from back then. So that's how they were able to see if it works. They tested it on objects that they knew the age, right? This was from Egypt. This was from the time of Cleopatra, and they know where she was. Great! But what's the problem with carbon-14? Well, they went ahead and said, well, based on this, we can start measuring everything. Well, okay, great. Why don't you measure dinosaurs? You say dinosaurs are 65 million years old. Great, this is a reliable method. And I agree, it is. It is pretty reliable. Why don't you start measuring dinosaur? Oh no, it won't work for dinosaurs. Because you see, dinosaurs lived 65 million years ago. That's what they made up their mind. They decided, they don't have proof. They decided, and I'll tell you why soon, that it was 65 million years ago. And therefore, this system of carbon-14 doesn't go beyond 50,000 years. Some say less even. So because it doesn't go, you can't use it for things beyond 50,000 years, I can't use it on dinosaurs. Well, there were some scientists who were sneaky, and they took bones and they did not tell the lab that these were dinosaur bones. And they checked them out, and it came back 6,000, 8,000 years, not millions of years. In other words, supposedly, it should have come out with something astronomical, or it shouldn't have worked at all. But it did come. It did come up with an age that was similar to other objects that had the same kind of measurement, 6,000 years. Now, you may ask me, well, wait a minute. 8,000 and 50,000 is still more than what we believe the world to be old. We believe the world is 5,771. So carbon-14, which is the most reliable method of all the methods, presents a little bit of a problem too. Well, at least it's not millions of years old, the object. That is totally out of the question. But what about the thousands of years? Is that a problem? The answer is no. Because the most reliable method that we have, called carbon-14, has weaknesses. The weaknesses it has is that it makes certain assumptions. Okay, and that's the problem with it. So I'm going to quickly go over all the assumptions and then move on, because I don't want to make this lecture too technical. Assumption number one, I'm going to read it to you, is that the amount of concentration of carbon-14 in the cycle of carbon has always been stable. Okay, they're making an assumption that all this time from the very beginning, the amount of carbon-14 in the cycle was steady or constant. That the rays of the sun were constant, that there was a constancy in the decay of the atoms of the carbon-14, that any organic matter that is dead does not change in the amount of carbon that it has, no matter what happens to it, even if it's contaminated. Actually, I should say without contamination at least, but it will not change. That the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has always been constant. That the storage of carbon in the ocean has never changed in its amount. That the formation and decay of carbon-14 has always been in equilibrium, the atoms. All of these assumptions all disappear or all fall apart once you introduce the big event called Mabul. Remember the Mabul? The big Mabul, the big flood of Noah's time. If you agree, and even if the scientists, some scientists will admit that if they know for a fact that the Mabul occurred, then they won't rely on the carbon-14 dating of many objects. Because that will have contaminated, that would have changed things a lot. That would have destroyed everything. It messed up everything. Not only did it mess up everything, we made several assumptions. The atmosphere changed since then. The climate was different then. Today we have glaciers. We have continents that drifted apart. It used to be one mass of Earth. And the continents broke up. You know how much damage this Earth incurred, it had? So you have all of these changes that occurred as a result of the cataclysmic events. Besides the flood, you had two additional floods, one that covered a third of the globe and one that covered 2/3 of the globe, that the rabbis talk about in the Midrash, one before the Mabul, one after the Mabul. So you have tremendous amount of water pressures all over the world. So once you have that, it takes away the whole reliability of your carbon-14. Remember, this is the most reliable. There are other methods that to measure the age of the Earth that you cannot really rely on. Look at, for example, the geology. The geology column, as they call it, the geological column, says like this. Look at their way of thinking. How do I know this animal is 100 million years old? Because I dug it up from strata. Strata is a layer. You have a whole big, you have many layers in a rock bed, in a bedrock, I should say. Many layers of rock, different kinds of rock, sedimentary rock, all kinds. And they say, I found this animal or these fish in this layer. Okay? Now this animal is 65 million years old. So therefore this layer must be millions of years old too. It was not laid down before that. It took time, millions of years until it formed this layer. So this animal that I've decided, remember I decided it was 65 million years old or 100 years old, I found it over here, so this must be 100 million years old. Now, how do I know these animals are 100 million years old? Because they were found over here, and this strata is 100 million years old. You see how it's a circular reasoning? This strata is 100 years old. Why? Because the animal is 100 years old, and it was found there. And this strata is 100 million years old. I'm sorry, this animal is 100 million years old because it was found in this place, which is 100 million years old. They're all dependent on each other. They don't have any proof. Then you have the method of using minerals. That's a very fascinating method. You have a lot of oil in the world. You know how oil is made according to them? All the decay of all the vegetation in the world. It takes time to decay, and after a while it became black oil. They can't prove it. We know there's a little bit of oil coming from everything, but not black tar and oil. But anyway, they say that over time that's how it became oil. So in the Sahara Desert where there's a lot of oil, it used to be full of vegetation. Now, there's one simple explanation for all minerals, whether it's a diamond that takes many years to form naturally, whether it's oil that takes millions of years to form, if this were true through vegetation decay. The Midrash says that when Hashem created the world, ready-made. Do you know that Adam and Chava, when they were created, they were not infants? They were not little babies. They were like, he was like a 20-year-old man, the Midrash says. He didn't have to have his diapers changed. He was an adult. Hashem created the world ready-made, with trees ready-made, everything. It was. He didn't have seeds. Everything ready-made. So you have ready-made oil, you have ready-made gold, ready-made diamonds, whatever the world needed, it was created with. But they don't have, the scientists don't have this midrash. They don't believe in a creator. But once you understand that there's a creator, these questions disappear. There's no reason for these questions. One of the biggest questions that science has is, oh, I have the biggest proof that the world is millions of years old. You know how? You know that star near Andromeda galaxy, or near that galaxy, or the many, many stars that are light years away. You know how long it takes for the light to reach Earth? Millions of years. At the speed of light, it's so far away, millions of years. What is a light year? A light year is the speed of the speed that light travels in 1 year.
Time.
What is that? The distance that light goes in 1 year. 186,000 miles a second. Second, I think? Yeah. Yeah, right? You know how much that is? Multiply that times 60 per minute, per hour, per day, per month, per year. We have many, many zeros for how close is the closest star. I think is 3.4 light years to the Earth. The sun is only 93 million miles away. The closest star is I think about 3.4 light years. Light years from here. You know how long it takes for the light to come here? A couple years. And there's some that are millions of years from here. We can actually see some through our big telescopes that are millions of light years away from here. Incredible that we can see it today with big telescopes. Yes?
But there is a concept, I think, that the time can stand still. We have that in Torah when Joshua made the...
Right, there's a lot of concepts. Sure, yeah.
That's also
Time can stand still, yeah.
The time can stand still.
Yeah.
According to Torah, right? Would
Yeah.
that be true then?
Yeah, but when Hashem, why don't you say simple? When Hashem created the world, the light was already coming. You turned on the switch, and then the light came. You know, what's the big deal? Once you have a creator, you don't have all these questions. We don't need it. We don't need it. Yeah. There's another method that I forgot to mention called uniformitarian that claims that everything that you see today was exactly the same as it was in the past. We don't believe in that because things did change. People started eating meat after the Mabul. People are living less than they did before that. The whole weather changed. The mountains and valleys that were formed as a result of Mabul. The Mabul really made tremendous amounts of changes in everything. What about the dinosaurs? The dinosaurs became extinct, just like many species have become extinct. And Hashem maybe wanted them to become extinct faster as the world was growing, becoming more and more populated. Many species, as we speak, are becoming extinct. The only species that do not become easily extinct, anybody know which one it is? The fish. Hashem will not make the fish become extinct because the Japanese need to have sushi. The real reason is because they received the blessing. The fish received the blessing. That is why in the Mabul also, even though there was, at least for a while, was hot water, boiling water, they were lower, in the lower depths of the water, which was not hot. Hashem preserved the fish and the whales and everything that lives in the water. They received the blessing. But other animals, you go to La Brea Tar Pits here in Wilshire, you will see skeletons of saber-toothed tigers, mastodons, mammoths that lived over here a few blocks. They were running here. They became extinct. They were either overhunted or from disease or from all kinds of natural events. And especially when the Mabul came and destroyed so much, even though Noach did take into the Teva at least 2 of every species, right? After they came out, they did not necessarily last for too long. And why would Hashem allow animals to become extinct? Because they're not as necessary as they were in the past. Every animal has a need. Everything that was created has a purpose. Even cockroaches, spiders, scorpions, there's a purpose. There's something that they do. if there's no need for it anymore, it can go extinct. Otherwise, Hashem would not allow anything that He created to go extinct. Why? But man did hunt, and there are diseases, there are plagues, there are all kinds of natural events, phenomena that could have brought about the extinction of many species, including the dinosaurs.
So the dinosaurs existed at the time of Adam and Chava?
Of course, they existed up until recently. Up until, I believe, that they were up until about 3,500 years ago, 3,500 years ago, you had all kinds of species. Till the 3,500 years. You had all kinds of species that all over the world that you don't have today that were very, very, unique. As of course, man multiplied and took over and went all over the place, and there were many diseases. The animals that were not blessed, these animals that were not blessed, just became extinct. There's no need for them. They're very big. Some of them are very, very big. The biggest animal that ever lived, that was ever created, is still around. Anybody know which one it is? The blue whale. A Leviathan HaKachol. It's the biggest animal that was ever around from the time of Sheshet Yemei Bereshit that we know of. There was no other large animal. No, it's bigger than all the dinosaurs. Yeah.
He has a question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
That I've heard when the world was first created, 365 humanoid species were created, corresponding with the days of the solar year. That we are not the only humanoid species.
I'm going to get to that. That's another idea I'm going to cover soon. So you're anticipating Baruch Hashem. Yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet. Yeah, very good. You're anticipating some of the points that I'm going to cover. Yeah, but as you can see from the Torah, from the Midrash, from the Zohar, there are many explanations for many things that the scientists are unaware of that we have answers to, whereas they don't have answers and don't have the tools to be able to figure out everything, and they sometimes don't even have the desire to figure it out. They're afraid of knowing of reaching the conclusion that there is a creator. So now let's get to the next point. What about what you mentioned earlier, the Zohar that says Hashem creates worlds and destroys them? Maybe there were other worlds, and maybe the world is older. The Zohar is very clear about what it means. These are spiritual worlds. It has nothing to do with physical worlds. This is the only physical world that we know of. And that statement that says Hashem creates worlds and He destroys is a completely Kabbalistic concept that has something to do with Shvirat HaKelim, if you've ever heard that in Kabbalah. Destruction of vessels, destruction of worlds. It has nothing to do with physical world. The Zohar says so clearly. It's not my interpretation. Are there any other worlds with life? If there would, it would not contradict what Judaism teaches. We haven't seen anywhere that it says there isn't, but we don't think there is, because David HaMelech tells us, "Hashamayim shamayim Lashem, ve'ha'aretz natan livnei Adam." Everything in the heavens belongs to Hashem, and this land, this earth, He has given to us. And from all that we can see through our telescopes, the conditions necessary for life don't exist anywhere else. But I have a surprise for you. There are other forms of life in this world, in this earth. Some of them called shedim, demons. Under the ground, in the air, all over the place. Demons, yes. Other creatures, yes. That you can see with your naked eye, not necessarily. But they exist. So there are things that people have seen, and they're not aliens from other worlds, other planets. They do live with us in this world. Yes?
What about Mored, though? In our battle led by Barak, one of the Shoftim,
right. First of all, that's more of a medrash. It's not literal. It's not what you're talking about. The battle is not literal. A battle with forces outside. The best way to understand it is that there are forces out there that are more related to angels, okay, and to the forces that Hashem created, but they're not human in nature. So whether they're in space, whether they're under the earth, or whether they're in the air, it makes no difference, but they're not other forms of beings as we are. They're other forces. Just like there are angels and demons, there are all kinds of forces out there that Hashem created, including the ministers of the mazalot, of the mazal. Every country, every nation has his own minister above. These are also forces to reckon with. Just to finish, we started discussing a very important principle here, that Hashem is first and Hashem is last. Hashem, the rabbis also remind us, is me'ever lazman. He's beyond time. Time does not really relate to him. He created time. And because time does not relate to him, that is one of the explanations of how Hashem knows the future and does not interfere at the same time with your free will. If he knows everything, if he knows the outcome of what we're going to do, some claim, well, that means he's forcing us to do it. He knows in advance. Hashem is beyond time. There's no such thing as yesterday, today, and tomorrow for him. It's all happening at the same time. That's a little bit difficult to understand because he's beyond time. In other words, the rules that apply to us do not apply to him. That is why the Kabbalah calls him simply Ein Sof. Ein Sof is a term that if you study Kabbalah, you will see Hashem is Ein Sof. Ein Sof, in other words, there's no end to him. He's always been around, he will always be. Something that we cannot fully comprehend with our limited human mind. Because we cannot fully comprehend, the Rambam says very clearly, the rabbis have stated it very strongly, do not ask certain questions. One of the questions not to ask is, what was before Hashem? What will be after? What's above? What's below? There are certain things that we're not allowed to ask because nobody can ever give you a satisfactory answer, and you can get yourself into trouble by venturing in these areas that are too difficult for the human mind to comprehend. So therefore, there are some things that we don't ask, and we can have a wonderful, good life without knowing these things. I always make fun of people that go, have all these big questions. When they go on a plane, they don't ask the pilot, how does the plane fly? They don't have any idea of how this plane, this piece of aluminum, picks up 350 people in the air and takes them from here to Israel. That's incredible. Think about it. A piece of aluminum picks up an entire village, an entire town, and just in 15 hours. How does it happen? Today, of course, we know, if you've read a little bit about avionics, what what goes into the design of a plane, what's the jet stream, and the many factors that go into flight. But most people don't know it, right? Same thing with those people who drive a car. Do you know what's happening in your motor as you're driving when you're pressing the gas? Do you know what it does? What does the gas do when you press the gas pedal? Do you know? Does anybody here know what happens when you're pressing the gas pedal? What really happens? How does that move the car? Just stepping on the thing. You don't care. You just get in and you drive. Don't you want to know? Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wants to. Right? You trust your doctor. He gives you medication. How does it work, doctor? It kills the microbe. You just trust him. You just trust the pilot. You just trust your car. You can't trust God. Leave it to him. He created the world. He knows what he's doing. Trust in him. Even though you don't understand everything there is, you still fly the plane. You can still live your life. Be a good person. And believe in what he told you, that is the truth. We don't have to understand and know everything. There's some people say, no, I won't do it until you explain to me. Why do I have to have kosher food? Why can't I have alligator? Alligator! I want to taste zebra meat. They're cute. Stripes. That'd make a good steak. Zebra. Why? It has nothing to do with health. It has nothing to do with health. If it would be health, the Torah would say, stay away from it. It's unhealthy. A lot of people eat all these meats, especially in China. They eat anything that crawls, and they're pretty healthy. Anything that moves. The Torah says it's a decree. The one who created the world, he knows why these things are not good for us, for the Jew. For the non-Jew, it's okay. He didn't say it's not good for the non-Jew. It's not a poisonous mushroom that is no good to everyone. This is okay for them, but not for us. Why exactly, we don't need to know. The best answer for anybody that, if you ever have an argument with another Jew especially about, I can't understand this, this is not right, doesn't make any sense. Does it have to make sense to you? You do a lot of things that don't make sense to you. Why do you have to know this for? Isn't it enough that God said so? Now, if you don't believe in God, that's a different problem. But if you believe in God, you see how everything makes a difference if you believe. Once you believe, there's no questions asked. Once you believe that there's a creation, all these things fall apart. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I think he said once to someone who asked him about the fossils, the millions of years of, they found fossils that are He said, the Rebbe said something like, Hashem could have created a world with fossils. Even though that's not our tradition as far as I know, that he just creates fossils just to put fossils in the ground. What for? But I think the idea that he was trying to express is, once you believe in a creator, he can do anything he wants. Hu hakol yachol. Yes. You want to? Yeah.
What about how at Har Sinai we said to Hashem, we will obey and we will learn?
Yes.
Then just being content with blind faith, like we don't know why we keep kosher, that's not part of learning.
No. I did say in the very first lecture, that you were not here, that by us emunah is a yediah, and I want to emphasize that again. We know for a fact God created the world, and therefore it's incumbent upon us that our faith should be knowledge, not just blind faith. We have to try to figure out as much as we can and convince ourselves that what we know is a fact and not just belief. There are things we'll never know for a fact until they happen, like Tchiyat HaMetim. Hashem promised He will bring it about, that He will bring about the dead. We trust Him. He proved Himself once, He'll do it again. We don't know it for a fact. It didn't happen yet. But we know for a fact that He exists, that He created the world, because we have enough evidence. So that evidence is important for us to study and review. And today, with all the science and the technology that we have, we actually can convince ourselves even more. We can see the beauty in creation much more than 200 years ago. They couldn't see. Do you know? Just a quick example that there is a whole bunch of butterflies, monarch butterflies, that travel every year in a migration route from North America, from the United States to a certain spot, a certain tree and forest in Mexico. How do they know? They were never there. This is a new generation. And just, I'll give you a quick example. There's incredible things that we're discovering today through science that has the tools to photograph this. How do they know? How do they do it? The butterflies, how do they do it? Why do they go there? They go all the years the same. I mean, unless Hashem is guiding them, they have some GPS from above that is showing them the way. How do they know to get there? So today we have so many tools at our disposal that I've always said that science should use these tools, if anything, to prove creation, not to ask questions about it. Today we have the tools to strengthen our emunah, to become stronger in our faith, and a lot of scientists have become ba'alei teshuvah, scientists who were not believers. Because of the tools that they have, they said they couldn't believe what their eyes were seeing. Cells were moving, the complexities of the human body. If you have an open mind, you are able to see. Be open-minded, be humble, and you will not have too many questions. The questions will not be important anymore, because you will know the ikar. You will not be distracted by all this nonsense. This is a lot of nonsense. When we know what the ikar is, the tachlit is to serve Hashem. And not only do we know that Hashem, of course, is first and Hashem is last and Hashem will always be, the eternity of Hashem reminds us of one more thing, that there is an eternal world out there, very, very soon, that we will B'ezrat Hashem be entering, and that is Olam Haba, Olam HaNetzach, that all the souls, of course, that have a share to the world to come, will B'ezrat Hashem be able to enjoy that. That is coming very, very soon. This is just a prosdor. This is just a temporary world. 70 years, 75, if you're really strong, have good genes, maybe 80, a little bit more, right? Give or take. We don't stick around here forever. Before you know it, you have to pack up and leave. It's depressing, but it shouldn't be. When you know in advance that you're headed to an eternal world, then you're excited about it. As long as, of course, you prepared for it. So what we should not lose track of and what we should focus is on preparing ourselves to get to our destination, Olam Haba, safely. Thank you.